All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. So, welcome to today's session. As usual, I will run through the markets over here and highlight some of the key opportunities available for the week itself. Right. So, this current 2 weeks, to be honest, there wasn't much of a opportunities available in the market. But I think going into this week here, we might get some of it setting up, right? Just bear in mind, I think I did mention last week as well, going into the end of the year, sometimes the market is just going to be generally slower. Uh, and we'll see quite a bit more of a consolidation, right? So of course, consolidation means that eventually the market would still need to break out of that consolidation range zone, and basically that's where the opportunity is, right? So overall, we definitely want to still kind of keep track of what the market is developing. Though we may not get a lot of trades, it's still very important to just kind of like keep ourselves up to date in terms of like the development of things, right? So we do not kind of like fall out of the market itself. Okay. So with that said, let's take a look at the euro dollar. Okay. If there are any other instruments that I may not necessarily go through, and you like a second opinion of that, just feel free to put it into the chat as well. Okay. So euro dollar over here, I'm still expecting some sort of a pullback towards the FIB 15618, which is around 1.1580 to 1.1560. Now, this is something that we expect a pullback, right? So naturally, you can see that right now the state of the market is basically very, very corrective in nature. There's a lot of overlapping move. We did attempt to get some kind of a short setup or short trade last week, but personally, I got out at break even for that because the market actually can push up. From there, tag us out at break even, and continue to do a little bit more of a corrective development, right? So not the easiest trade to always kind of like catch the corrective move, but oftentimes that also presents some sort of opportunity. Okay, but for now, I think for me, with what I'm observing over here, not so keen on the short side as of now, but more of like if market really pulls back towards a key area, that I'll be more inclined to see if we can get a buy instead. Right, so that's the take on euro. Right, obviously, if you have your own techniques and setup as well, can definitely still look to sell it as part of a short-term pullback trade. Okay. Then next up is GBP USD. So GBP USD over here seems to be giving us a pretty clean structure. Okay, and this one here, I'm looking more of the upside, so it's more of a continuation instead of a pullback trade, right? So this is very, very clean. We have this push up, pull back, this push up, break of that structure, pull back, push up, break of that structure as well. And of course, this move here is impulsive. We have this market imbalance feather gap. In terms of Elliott wave perspective, right? If I can pull out a little bit, okay, we can look at it from this high here. We have a WXY. So if this is going to be the start of the new push to the upside, then the upside will potentially kind of break that 1.38 high. But right now, of course, it's not like the most impulsive push up, but looking more of a what we call nested structure here from Elliott wave perspective, which means this can be a 1-2. Okay. And of course, this third move up might not be the third wave up, but potentially it can be what we call nested. So it's a 1-2, 1-2, and then maybe this would be like a smaller degree tree, right? So if kind of put that into perspective, this can look something like that. And of course, nested meaning, this would potentially be a smaller degree kind of a 5-wave move out, right? So maybe of course, we need to see the development of things, but if this is going to be an internal, then, wave 4 cannot overlap wave 1, right? So we need to also see how that's developing, but that would be a little bit more of a later part when we get some more of a confirmation. But for now, we're just taking a very, very simple structure basis where we have this as an impulsive push. So if you can get a corrective pullback, which seems to be developing corrective right now, then the area around 1.3260 would naturally present an opportunity to look for a buy. Okay, so this one here, if you go to GBP USD, I've actually looked at this more of a 2-hour time frame to give us the have like nicer perspective of things. We have most of our criteria required, right? So this little pullback here even have some internal liquidity sweat. Then of course, that impulsive break, that's the fair gap. We're just basically waiting for the corrective pullback towards the area at 1.3250, 1.3245, and naturally that becomes a buy opportunity for us to consider, right, to the upside. So pretty straightforward, very, very clean. As of now, looking at the structure, with its continuation of a development, then we might be able to gain a little bit more clarity and confirmation in terms of like Elliott wave perspective, what structure is developing. Okay, so that's on pound. Aussie dollar over here, we had this very, very extended move to the upside. So definitely expecting some sort of a pullback eventually. Okay, and of course, right now we just do a very, very simple FIB expectation, which is towards 0.6530. Okay, now this might open up an opportunity to trade it in the short term to the downside, right? But of course, we definitely want to wait for some sort of a confirmation that price is indeed starting its pullback and correction. Okay, and what we need is some sort of an impulsive push to the downside fast. Okay, so this might take some time. I'm not gonna be like focusing on Aussie as of this week too much, right? Because I believe that would need time, and if this is gonna happen or kickstart this week, then the opportunity will only present itself maybe going into next week. Okay, so Aussie dollar really nothing much as of now, but we're kind of expecting that pullback, right? So again, depending on the setups that you personally look into, some of you may have your personal setups, and that might open up that opportunity to kind of like get involved in it a little bit earlier, okay, or maybe a little bit more aggressive. That suits your own personal style, but right now, that's the expectation, okay? Then we have dollar Canadian. So dollar Canadian here recently had this pretty impulsive push to downside, which opens up the possibility that that might be a wave tree. So from this high here, that's a 1, 2, 3, and then wait for development, and then expect another move down. And of course, if we start to zoom out, right, that can be very, very possible, right? So it kind of like update this a little bit. This can be where wave C is. This, I mean, everything can still be very, very valid in terms of here being wave 5, this being wave C, right? Wave 3 would then be pushed up a little bit over here. This is where wave 4 can be. Okay, and of course, then that would turn into a internal degree structure. Okay, and then of course you can see if you kind of look at this perspective or this angle, right? Then this would be the impulsive wave. This would be the corrective pullback, and then if this is going to be the start of the first wave, then the minimum kind of expectation would be this low, right? Which will put you around somewhere 1.3530. Okay. So the downside is definitely there in terms of the room of which price can develop. Right. So we've kind of update this a little bit. So right now here, if price were to respect where the wave 1 territory is, which is 1.3970, and of course, more importantly, is the zone here where wave 4 would likely conclude, okay, around 1.3880, 1.3920, then that's definitely a sell side opportunity. Now, just also want to bring your attention or potential interest in a shorter time perspective, right? So this is more of like perhaps kind of like intraday 15-minute or even a 30-minute time frame will be neat. It's of course on the high time frame, we're kind of expecting the pullback towards this territory, right? To complete the wave 4. Okay, so as we are expecting the pullback, then in the short term, that can also open up possible intraday kind of opportunities, where of course you can see this low here has been swept. This high here has been taken out as well with momentum, right? So that's where your fair value gap is. So we have liquidity sweep, we have change of character or break of structure, we have the momentum push to the upside, we have fair value gap. If the market were to kind of pull back correctively towards this zone, right? Again, if you take fit from swing low to swing high, that's where we can look out for an opportunity to get involved in the short-term buy, right? So we're not kind of expecting like huge reversal to the upside, but we can potentially capitalize on this pullback towards maybe 3880, right? So of course, if you do a quick measurement in terms of like your risk to reward ratio, 3880 is just going to be somewhere there. Potentially still can give you about 2.8, risk to reward ratio, which is not too bad, but the stop here is pretty tight, right? The stop here is about 20 pips. If you give it a bit of spread consideration because it's so tight, you can push that to about 25 pips, okay? Maybe extend this a little bit lower. You still get about 2.3 risk to reward ratio, okay? So it's a very decent trade setup. The only consideration that you might want to factor in, of course, is this is definitely a very counter trend trade, where the market momentum is obviously bearish. And if you're going to take this, you need to be aware you're basically going against the overall momentum, but you're kind of capitalizing on the fact that you are expecting some sort of pullback, right? So of course, there's no 100% guaranteed in trading. There's no 100% certainty. It's all about probability and of course the management of risk here, right? If you are okay with this, you can accept the fact that this is a counter trend and carries a little bit of a higher risk. And then of course with this kind of setup, if it's fine for you, then that's definitely an opportunity to look out for. Personally, I will be definitely looking at this going into tomorrow, right? And of course, since we're on this topic, it's also important to kind of factor in that if there's any important news, because if you're looking at intraday, so things like this matters, right? Because that's going to create a volatility in the market, and if your stop is basically pretty tight, like 20 pips, 25 pips, right? You want to take note of potential risk events, okay? So that's one tomorrow evening, 10:45 Canadian rate statement. So there's something that I would say, because of that, right? I might not be taking the dollar Canadian trade setup. But of course, that's a personal preference thing, right? Some of you are perfectly fine with that, then by all means, it's still an opportunity available. Okay. But for me, obviously, this is something that I would probably avoid, right? Having that into consideration. If there's no high impact news, there's no rate statement on dollar Canadian. In fact, if you just look a little bit forward, we also have the FOMC, after the Canadian statement. Therefore, dollar Canadian is something that I might be a little bit more conservative and maybe not take this trade, right? Can I put that way? Okay, but I think I'm perfectly fine with the pound dollar setup, right? Because I think there is sufficient room before where our entry is. Okay, and basically from my entry to my stop, there's sufficient room for that volatility as well. Okay. So that's a little bit of a context perspective of how I apply it in my trading processes. Okay. So that's on dollar Canadian. Right, then going to dollar yen. Dollar yen is here where I share with traders. We are basically waiting for price to kind of take out this high here with momentum. Okay, I mean right now it's kind of testing that, but it's not very, very convincing at this moment because it's without clarity in terms of whether this is going to push up impulsively yet. There isn't much of a momentum as this is continue moving higher as well. So I'm just a little bit cautious because this can just easily turn into a bigger sort of a corrective pullback. Okay. Overall, the direction is there, right? I mean, it's generally going higher. We have this as an invalidation level, but it's just not really giving that confidence of the upside, okay? Because this move up doesn't really carry a lot of weight, right? I mean, here there's that momentum there. Okay, the pullback towards 50% kind of like looks pretty great as well. So that's where I'm waiting for this break with momentum, because if the market can break this with momentum, right, and do a little bit of a corrective pullback, we can then expect more upside, right? Then we can say that, all right, this is the push up, this is the pullback, this is the swing low. We can then anticipate price to take out that high. Okay. So we'll need to see, right? We'll probably need to give it another like 1 day or maybe even 2 sometimes to see how price is gonna kind of like react off this high, right? Because if this is just gonna come back down, then it's not a convincing break. Then the corrective development might continue for some time, and that's something that I'm not too keen to participate in. Right? So that's on dollar yen. Then we have gold. Okay, so dollar yen. We just need to see how price is going to continue to develop for the next couple of days, right? Good. Okay, then we have gold. So gold over here is pretty interesting because from this angle, from this perspective, with this high, very strong momentum push, kind of a pullback came to us this top, did not successfully break up. I mean, we have a little bit of a fake break, but I would see that as kind of like a liquidity sweep, a little bit of fake break. Another attempt did not really break through, but at the same time, you want to be observant that this low hasn't been broken as well. So we're in some sort of what we call a consolidation phase. And I'm leaning a little bit more towards the downside because then this will complete a very nice little 1, 2, 3. Okay, but for me to commit and say that the price will likely move lower from here, we need to see a very convincing break of this low. Okay, what I mean by that is we want to see some sort of an impulsive break to the downside. If we can get that, this will establish itself as a swing high, and then this opens up the possibility where price will retest this low. Okay, and that's something that we can look into for trade opportunities and setup. Okay, but for now, gold is basically in consolidation, and I will just wait until the break to the downside happens. Okay, so pretty straightforward. A little bit of a patience here that you need to have, but just observe, for that low, which is around 4160, if we can get that convincing break, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at the downside. Silver, very, very similar here as well. Price has been testing the zone for a couple of days. We definitely would expect some sort of a push to the downside. Okay, not so much of a reversal, but more of a corrective pullback, or some sort of a retracement after completion of the WXY structure. Okay, we can see that price is so far respecting this zone, this key area, but we don't see some sort of an impulsive drop yet. Right, so what this means is that this can continue to develop a little bit more of a diagonal structure, which means it can continue to push a little bit higher. But if there's no momentum there, it's still kind of suggesting that we might see a deeper pullback, and that deeper pullback is where the opportunity can be in the near term. Right, but obviously, similar to gold, we want to see some sort of an impulsive push to the downside as a confirmation that price is indeed starting its pullback before we commit for any trade setup to the downside. Okay, so silver, that's the take right now to really monitor and keep an eye on what's next. Okay. Then we have crude oil, right? So crude oil here is an interesting one because price actually broke the channel a little bit. But I can't share that, the break is not really impulsive. We don't really see any impulsive move as it's going up. Very, very corrective in nature, which it's already signaling that this may not be the up push yet. And there's a good possibility this will come down and retest this before going up. Okay. So moving forward on crude oil, right, we get a very nice little impulsive drop here. If the next day, which is, later part of today going into tomorrow, we can see some sort of a corrective pullback. Okay, we have a potential sell setup that we can keep an eye on, right? So if I bring you to crude oil on the hourly time frame, okay, to zoom in a little bit, we do have the high here taken out, right? We have this mini low here taken out as well. So we have the liquidity sweep with the breaker structure. We have the momentum push here, which is the failed gap. Okay. And if we can get some sort of a corrective pullback towards that zone, that's where the setup can present itself. Okay. right now we only have this little push here, so it's a little bit early to say if this is going to be a corrective pullback. Obviously, if it's a corrective pullback, it carries a little bit more weight. And this is something that might present itself as a setup going into tomorrow. And then going into Thursday as well, right? So I mean, if it's not gonna be complete, maybe by tomorrow, there might be, still a valid opportunity to set up by Thursday, okay? Because if it's gonna correctively pull back, then it takes time and spot, okay? But crude oil is definitely one in the watch list to be looking at a close watch, right? Okay, so that's on that. S&P 500. So this one here, we can see that overall is definitely bullish, but the recent development has seen slow down its momentum. It's developing more of a crawl. So in the near term, in the short term, we can't expect a pullback, right? A retracement. Potentially maybe going back towards 6700 or 6710. Now, of course, short term, if you're looking to trade the indices, that might present a short term sell trade opportunity as a retracement. But again, you want to wait for a first impulsive drop. Okay, so very, very similar to gold and silver. You don't want to commit to the sell side until price give you the indication that it's pulling back. Okay. I'm not so much of a indices kind of a trade. I'm more towards, if I'm going to touch equities, it's more of like long-term investment approach. So overall, my view on equities in the US market is still generally bullish for the year, right? I mean, we have another like 2 weeks or so, right, to end off the year. But I think this year is definitely going to end off like a little bit more bullish. But of course, this is going to pull back. Yeah, but all I want to say is that equities, from a macro fundamental perspective, there's no clear indication that we're going to see a crash. So generally, we're bullish longer term, meaning any sort of a corrective pullback might present an opportunity for accumulation, right? For you to actually buy or look at long-term positions on equities. If you're kind of trading it as an index, then short term you can look out for the pullback, and then around that 6, 7, 10 area, you can look out for the buy. Okay. Pound yen. So pound yen may have completed itself as a diagonal, right? We get that last final kind of little bit of push, but of course it's not confirmed yet. The confirmation comes when we get an impulsive push down, a corrective pullback, and then we can start to look for short-term sell. Okay, maybe towards the zone, and then we'll look for upside continuation after which. Okay, so a little bit of a patience game as well here on the pound yen. You probably need to give it like until next week. I don't foresee any opportunity coming in this week here in pound yen. Okay, very similar here is the Aussie yen, right? So Aussie yen here is still pushing up. Generally the momentum and the directional bias is bullish, but we'll want to wait for a corrective pullback before committing to any buy trade. Okay, so this one here, again, I don't think that you're gonna get anything meaningful this week. Probably just gonna be putting this aside until next week. Okay. Then we have pound odd, right? Pound odd is also an interesting pair to keep an eye on right now. Okay. It does, in my view, it does need a little bit of time for this entire thing to maybe develop itself and then give us the opportunity. I'm so far with this development, I don't see any near-term opportunity to ride this to the upside. Okay, but if the market were to pull back from here towards 2.0260, okay, if you can get a market to pull back towards 2.0260, okay, here, if you can get that, this will be a pretty nice one, because then this would break that internal, and this would complete itself as an impulse correction, and then we can expect one more push down. Okay, so overall we are bearish on pound odd. If we can get price to pull back towards the 50% mark around the 2.0260 area, that's where we can get a very nice little opportunity to look for a sell. Okay, right now I don't really see a clear setup that is near to development in terms of the upside, right? So this is more of like waiting for price to pull back, and then we'll look to sell instead. Okay. And lastly here on my list is BTC. Okay, BTC here, I think what's developing on the daily seems to be a little bit of a clearer structure. Okay, so if you look at it from a daily point of view, okay, we have this as an impulse leg, right? So this one here you can see definitely very impulsive. So from this high here, we kind of look at it from this, and then we kind of look at the forecast where this can be a 1, 2, 3, wait for development, and then we continue to expect one more push down towards where that previous zone is, which is 77,000. Okay, so this kind of opens up a short-term sell opportunity, right? Of course, if you're kind of like a long-term believer of Bitcoin, then 77,000 area might be a good opportunity to look for accumulation to add on to your positions. If you're kind of looking to trade the crypto market, I think going down back to the 4-hour time frame, if we can get another pushback towards like 96,300 to 99,300 zone, right? And more importantly, price will need to respect that 10200,000. Then this will complete itself as a very nice little 3-wave WXY, as a wave 4. And then you look for the downside. Okay. Yeah, so that's something you can look out for if you're into like crypto. Obviously, this is more of like Bitcoin, but in general, if Bitcoin prices were to drop, it carries certain weight on the crypto market as well. Okay, so this is something you can look into. I'm not again actively trading the Bitcoin market. Again, same like equities and stocks, right? I'm more like longer term perspective on all this asset. Okay, but again, putting this here so that for those of you who are more into that, at least you have an awareness of it, and of course a slightly different perspective on what I'm looking at on this assets. Good. Okay. Yeah, so generally this week here, a couple of things that is on my watch list, right? We have the pound dollar, we have crude oil, we do have the Canadian as well. But just bear in mind that tomorrow we have the bank of statement, rate statement from BOC, and then following that we also have FOMC. So dollar CAD here might be a little bit tricky because the setup itself is more like 20 bits, right? So it's a bit tight to factor in that news volatility, and that's something that I might personally avoid. Okay. And then of course some of the more popular assets of interest like gold, silver, or even like the yens, probably need to be a little bit patient this week and see how things are going to develop, maybe going into next week, and then get more a little bit of a clarity from there. Okay, good. So up to this point, any particular questions that you guys may have, do drop it into the chat. All right. If not, then so far I don't see any. Yeah, so if generally there are no questions, then that's what I have in terms of my perspective of the market this week. So far, hopefully, it can give you an angle, as well as how to prepare your trade plan for the week as well. All right, so all good. Don't see any questions over here. Hopefully, give you guys that, as I mentioned, that insights to prepare for a week, and help you understand the market a little bit more. Right. So that's all for me for today's session over here then. Okay. All the best for the week. And as usual, I'll keep you guys updated and see you guys next week or next session. Okay. So